He's been called one of the unsung heroes of modern times. Fazleh Hassan Abed was more than just a mild-mannered accountant. As a young man in the early 1970s, he had a corporate multinational job in finance. He could have stayed on that career path and led a very comfortable life. Instead, in 1972, confronted with war and natural disaster in his homeland, he quit his job and founded BRAC, originally the Bangladesh Rehabilitation Assistance Committee.
People died because they were poor. And I thought that the kind of life I was leading at the time, working for Shell Oil, I thought that this life is not really something that I'd like to pursue. I'd like to pursue something else.
In the decades to come, BRAC would become massive, reaching 100 million people in Asia and Africa. It is known as one of the world's most effective anti-poverty efforts. Abed avoided the limelight. He preferred to let his work speak for itself. Microfinance, community healthcare, education, humanitarian aid, and more. What links these diverse programs together is Abed's lifelong conviction that hope itself can help people overcome poverty. He saw that poverty was not just a lack of money or skills. People remained trapped in poverty, in part because they thought things could never change. They thought it was their fate to be poor. So Abed started by changing this mindset. He gathered people in small groups to talk about their problems so that together they could confront the injustices that held them back. They began to understand that a better world was possible and that they themselves had the power to build it. This is the power of hope. Millions of people planning for the future, saving and investing, girls filling up classrooms, women starting their own businesses. BRAC is known for its entrepreneurial approach to tackling poverty. It is known for being efficient and effective, but it is far more than that. The legacy of Fazleh Hassan Abed is the triumph of hope over fate.
Human life is for a short period on Earth, and I would like that short period that each of us have to be as happy and as productive and as meaningful as possible.
Good evening, everyone. It's really wonderful to be able to welcome you to celebrate BRAC's 50th anniversary. I'm Danella Rapier. I'm the CEO for BRAC USA. We're part of the broader global BRAC family. 2022 marks half a century for BRAC, half a century of igniting hope with dedication, courage, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the power of people to unlock their potential and rise above poverty. Tonight, we want to celebrate and thank you, our community, for your belief in BRAC and for your role in our success. As you learned in our video just now, this year we are delighted to have just published a book about our founder, Sir Fazleh Hassan Abed. It's titled Hope Over Fate, authored by our very own Scott McMillan, a director at BRAC USA. It's based on hundreds of hours of interviews with Abed, with his family, BRAC's leaders and staff. I believe that Abed Bhai is how we affectionately refer to him, which means Brother Abed in his native Bangla language. Abed Bhai, I think, would be very humbled and pleased to know that his biography was published in the year of our 50th anniversary. So, gathering together here in person to recognize this important milestone is particularly meaningful after the tremendous challenges that we have all faced these past several years. We're especially grateful to be here in the beautiful Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. The Ford Foundation and BRAC have a very long history together, and we are very, very pleased that we are here to celebrate in their space. And now, as I think you all know, this is a very busy couple of weeks, and our next speaker, Darren Walker, is he's the president of the Ford Foundation. He is actually delayed, so he will be with us a little bit later. So we are going to go ahead and now hear some wonderful remarks from Friends of BRAC who wanted to wish us a very happy 50th anniversary.
It's an honor to join the entire BRAC community in celebrating 50 years of incredible work on behalf of others. Over the past 5 decades, BRAC has changed the way the world thinks about health, education, and development. It's improved the lives of millions of people in Bangladesh and around the world. I'm grateful for all you've accomplished, and that the legacy of my friend and BRAC's founder, Faisal Abed, lives on through your remarkable efforts. I miss him, we all do, but he'd be so pleased by what you're doing. All my best wishes for much success today, tomorrow, for another 50 years and beyond.
BRAC is an invaluable and indispensable institution fighting poverty and inequality in communities around the world. You have provided life-changing resources to people who have no other support. You've provided education to children previously outside the classroom. You now make a difference to the lives of 100 million people in 11 countries, and you should be very proud. Faisal was someone who was responsible for helping half the rate of infant mortality in Bangladesh. Someone who's revered in almost all the parts of the world that I've visited. I'm proud to have known Faisal and congratulate BRAC for all your work and all your initiatives. Happy 50th anniversary, and I wish you all the best as you continue your great work. Thank you.
BRAC means life, skills and programs to ensure every infant survives and every child thrives. BRAC means making a life, skills and entrepreneur programs to give hope and realize dreams. And BRAC means changing millions of lives for the better. Happy 50th anniversary to a lifelong partner.
I myself encountered BRAC and its distinguished founder, Sir Faisal Abed, in the early 2000s. In 2013, Sir Faisal received the Central European University's Open Society Prize. He said then that BRAC sought to eliminate poverty so that everyone can enjoy the conditions to act on their behalf and fulfill their own potential. On this 50th anniversary, let us celebrate what BRAC has achieved and may it continue to flourish.
Congratulations to BRAC. It's our great pleasure to celebrate their 50th anniversary. Abed Bai. Live a life of service with true compassion, courage, and conviction. The hundreds of millions of people whose lives Abed Bai transformed will remember him as a spark of hope. We look forward to continuing to join hands with BRAC to create a better world through education. Congratulations again to BRAC.
I met Sir Faisal Abed 15 years ago, and immediately I sensed that I was in the presence of a giant. He was humble, warm, sometimes quiet, but I always felt that deep, consistent conviction from him. And when he invited me to come visit BRAC in Bangladesh, I had the opportunity to see firsthand the scale and the impact the organization was having on people's lives. So when I think about Sir Faisal Abed, I really think that he embodies what global leadership is all about. And for that, we will be forever grateful.
50 years of BRAC is a huge achievement. And thank you for your undying belief in the potential of ordinary people to do extraordinary things if they're given the chance. Thanks very much.
Happy anniversary, BRAC. As a journalist, I met presidents and prime ministers, inventors and tycoons, but I've seen few people who changed the world as much as my old friend Abed. And that was because he showed that Global poverty is not intrinsic. It is something that we can overcome. Abed and BRAC showed that these are things we can overcome, that we can make a difference. He was in the business of investing our shared humanity in trying to make a better world. And so, congratulations, BRAC. And never think that BRAC is in the poverty business. BRAC is in the business of empowering people, of educating people, of lifting people, of making a difference all around the world. It's in the business of hope.
Thank you. I'm truly honored to introduce our next guest and the moderator of our panel discussion, Lord Mark Malloch Brown. Mark is president of Open Society Foundations, the world's largest private funder of independent groups working for justice, democratic governance, and human rights. His storied career spans more than 4 decades of advancing rights, justice, and sustainable development in his roles with the United Nations, with the World Bank, in the Prime Minister Gordon Brown's cabinet. And during his tenure at the UNDP, Mark was one of a select group of experts who were appointed by Kofi Annan to write the Millennium Development Goals in the basement of the UN New York office, so the legend goes. We're proud to call him our partner, and he is also a director of the BRAC Global Board. So Mark will moderate a discussion among our 3 esteemed senior leaders from BRAC who've all come from Bangladesh to be here with us tonight, and I'm very pleased to introduce all of them. We have Asif Saleh, Executive Director for BRAC Bangladesh, Shamran Abed, Executive Director for BRAC International, Tamara Hassan Abed, Managing Director for Enterprises and Chair of the BRAC University Board. So please come on up, and Mark will share a few words before the panel discussion.
Danella, thank you. And my big feeling about BRAC is we shouldn't be meeting here in this small basement at the bottom of the Ford Foundation, and forgive that reference, at OSF, where we're the competitors. So, but I don't mean we should be meeting at OSF either. I mean we should have taken over the whole General Assembly Hall at the UN, and we should have filled it, because BRAC is one of the greatest ideas of modern development. It was the first and is the most truly global South development NGO. 50 years ago, Abed Bai had this vision to step away from his career in business and finance to create a wholly Southern NGO. And to this day, the debates about how to decolonize aid, to use the phrase of the day, to build legitimate institutions of the global South, in a sense, the poster boy for how that can be done is BRAC. But it's also Bangladesh, a country that, as a British minister, I've occasionally found myself involved in the politics of more than I would have liked at certain key moments of Bangladesh's, let's euphemistically call it, transitions. But in terms of development, 2 great NGOs, BRAC and often the better known but smaller Grameen, have been an extraordinary development or model of development where you've seen, in a sense, the weakness of government replaced by formidable NGOs who have delivered extraordinary combinations of services across health, education, microfinance, technical skill building, and more recently, climate change. And you've seen them both innovate in ways that so often we don't see in this space, using not just the traditional donor models of Western NGOs, but the innovative models of self-financing through social enterprises and through the microfinance operation itself. And we've seen them take this model beyond its first home in Bangladesh, elsewhere in South Asia, and then subsequently to Africa. So if we are looking for the new models of development, the new cooperative partnerships of South and North, we see them in the 50 years of BRAC, and I'm sure we'll see them in the 50 years to come. So with that, I'm going to sit down and interview three remarkable individuals, or at least moderate their discussion. And I feel I'm stepping in on a family here. Because, you know, another feature in a way of BRAC is this astonishing phenomenon of the fact that its three senior leaders are related. Now, in the West, that would evoke all kinds of charges. Oh, my goodness, you know. But here, it is a tribute to the fact that three remarkable people with successful private sector careers of their own chose to come back to pick up the legend of the father of two of them and the father-in-law of the third, to press forward to build a BRAC in his vision to go the next stage. And so I'm going to start by asking them, you know, why did sort of family bond triumph over very successful private sector careers? Tamara, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. Let me just take a moment to thank everyone who's come here today to celebrate this really special occasion with us of BRAC's 50 years. My journey with BRAC started as a child. As some of you know, my father founded BRAC in 1972, and my mother was also very much involved in the early years. You know, I grew up going around with them to the villages of Bangladesh and you know, staying in villages and staying in some of the earliest BRAC, you know, places where BRAC worked. And then I finished my schooling in Bangladesh and in India and did a degree in economics from London, and then went back to Bangladesh, worked in corporate finance for a little while, and then moved to New York to do my MBA at Columbia. Joined Goldman Sachs, and then a few months after I joined, 9/11 happened. And that really pushed me to think about the purpose of what I was doing and what I really wanted to do with my life. And I felt this urgent need to go back to Bangladesh. And so in January of 2002, my father asked me if I could do a part-time gig with Arom to help with his transition to a new management team. And when I joined Arom in early 2002, I didn't really think that my skills in finance and investment banking would be relevant to an operation, a social enterprise that did retail in crafts. But what I soon found is that Arom was at the intersection of working with crafts and designers and craftspeople in an exciting field like retail. And it also had social impact at its core. And that, so I fell in love with Arom and the work that I was doing there, and I felt like I had found my calling. And so I've been in BRAC for the last 20 years now. And I now head all of BRAC's social enterprises, and we have 10 of them. And yeah, so here I am.
Yeah, thanks. And again, also, thank you very much for coming. So I should start by saying that I didn't have a remarkable private sector career. I had a non-lucrative journalistic career. And for everyone who's been a journalist, it's not very lucrative, but I mean, it was fun. But let me go back a little bit further. And, you know, as my sister said, I also grew up with BRAC, you know, so growing up, obviously, BRAC was very much part of our consciousness. But I actually didn't grow up thinking I would join BRAC or necessarily work for BRAC. I mean, I did at certain points because I think every child wants to emulate their parents at certain points in their lives, but that wasn't really the big plan growing up. And then in my mid-teens and late teens, I actually thought I wanted to be a politician. And the reason for that was actually interesting because I had grown up, I had seen my father work in an NGO and achieve a great amount of scale and achieve quite a lot of success in Bangladesh. But the more you thought about it, you realize that actually you're doing it because the people who are supposed to do it are not doing it, right? And the only way to have sustainable impact at scale is to do it through government. So then I went to boarding school, and I came to university in the US, actually, in upstate New York. And then I graduated. And then my father said, if you're really interested in politics, you should get into a profession that allows you to be self-employed, right? And the idea, and he said, you've talked about being a lawyer before, so go and study law. So I went back to the UK, I studied law, went back to Bangladesh, and became a journalist. So it was all, there wasn't really I've been thinking about it, what sort of is the underlying idea here, but there really wasn't one, was there? Till I was done with journalism. And then an opportunity came up at BRAC. And again, even when I left journalism, because I thought I'd had enough of it, I hadn't left to join BRAC. I just hung around for a few months trying to figure out what to do. And this was 12, 13 years ago. And a really nice opportunity came up to work on the microfinance side of BRAC, which had gone through a couple of bad years. And there was a new person coming in as the director of the program who wanted to really shake things up. And and I joined I joined as a program manager, and I worked on that for a while and then took on more, and here I am. But just to say that even though this was not in the plans, working for BRAC, actually, once I got in and started doing it, that's been exhilarating, right? Just being able to see, at least in Bangladesh and hopefully over time in the other countries as well, the scale of the impact and the breadth and depth of the organization. And for us at least, as opposed to many of our northern peers, just being so close to the ground and being able to see the change happen in front of your eyes, that's been very inspiring. So, I'm hooked now.
I see, beat that. I was more the accidental tourist for BRAC, because I can split up my life in three parts. First 18 years, I grew up in Bangladesh, a very typical middle-class family in Bangladesh. Then I moved to US to get my studies. And then, leading that American dream life, I graduated I had a computer science degree, and by the time I graduated, there was a dot-com boom happening, and I was like all over getting job offers left and right. But I joined Goldman Sachs, funnily enough, and that was in '97, and I worked there for almost 12 years. Making amends for my past sins. No. But essentially, while I was at Goldman, I started an organization called Drishtipat, which means take notice, for human rights abuse cases in Bangladesh and supporting the survivors. So that kind of triggered a lot of thinking, because that started this whole journey in terms of reconnecting back with Bangladesh. That organization grew. It was a volunteer-led organization, had its branches in London, DC, and a number of other places. And Shamaran happened to be a member of the London branch, and that's how I got to know him. And then it was kind of taking a life of its own, and I really wanted to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then I thought that I would switch careers, and I want to work in development. And what better place to do development than in Bangladesh? So I decided to move back. And I moved back, and I had a couple of years stint with the UNDP, working at the Prime Minister's office as a policy specialist on how technology can deliver for development. But then Shamaran introduced me to his dad, and his dad said, if you want to do development, you cannot do policy work. You got to get your hands dirty, and so you should come and join and work for BRAC. So that was it, and then I joined BRAC in 2011, and then the rest is history. So I've been with the organization for almost 11 years and never regretted a day.
So there you have it. 2, the pull of BRAC, and the 3rd, a journalist pushed by the professional shortcomings and impoverishment of the life. But look, I mean, 3 great individuals, and there are others in the audience, our global director and others who, you know, are also part of this extraordinary journey of this growing NGO. But I mentioned, and Tamara picked up on her experience running the social enterprises, and you know, they are a remarkable feature of BRAC. You know, the Oxfam shops that some of you know from the UK, or you know, don't actually come close to this model of an integrated social enterprise setup that isn't just fashion retailing, as you'll hear in a moment, but to my delight, when I became a global board member, I learned also included the bull semen, eggs, and various other sort of strange things, which Tamara has made a profit out of. Tamara, would you like to say a bit more about the social enterprises? In polite company, you understand.
Sure. So BRAC started working with social enterprises in the mid-70s, before people really started talking about social enterprise or understanding what they do. And our first social enterprise, our flagship one, was Arong. And the way Arong started, and this is the handicraft retail, is, you know, BRAC was organizing women to make products and training them in skills, you know, for silk farming as well as making handicrafts, and started supplying to a few shops in Dhaka, and soon realized that the artisans, the women, were getting paid when the goods were being sold. So BRAC came up with the idea that it wanted to control the whole marketing chain and open its own shop. So the first Arong shop appeared in Dhaka in 1978. And Arong has grown. Arong means a village fair in Bangla. And Arong has really grown and scaled over the years to become Bangladesh's most popular lifestyle retail brand. We now have about 25 outlets, and we also ship to 7 countries. In 2021, we made revenues of about $106 million, so just to give you a sense of the scale that we've been able to reach. We also have quite a few other enterprises, and just to tell you sort of, you know, how we define social enterprise at BRAC, or how we think about social enterprises. So social enterprises are very core to the mission of BRAC, and it is, you know, it exists. A lot of people think that our social enterprises exist to actually fundraise or make money to put into BRAC development programs, but that is actually not the case. Social enterprises very much work on alleviating poverty and empowering the poor. And we, you know, our core purpose can be any one or more of, you know, creating livelihoods, creating market linkages for what the poor produce, improving value systems, improving value chains, so that the investments that the poor makes in their assets or in their small enterprises, they can earn more from it, or we can increase the productivity of it. Often we'll figure out how to reach them with better quality inputs. So BRAC has always focused on, you know, microfinance plus approach, where you not only give, you know, people loans, but then you figure out what they do with their loans, and how can you sort of build an ecosystem, or how can you build enterprises around that so they can make investments, or in assets or in businesses, and how can you make, you know, how can you make sure that they earn more than they would have. So that's pretty much what we do with BRAC's enterprises. And we have 10 enterprises now. We have quite a few in the agro sector. So as Mark was saying, we have an artificial insemination enterprise to improve the productivity of, improve the breed of cattle. We have enterprises in dairy, in seed. We supply hybrid and high-yielding varieties of seed to smallholder farmers. So we have enterprises that have become sort of, you know, either the largest or the, you know, within the top 3 in their sector of operations. And, you know, we work with everything from crop farmers to dairy farmers, fish farmers, and you know, obviously craftspeople and artisans and beyond.
And I think it's worth saying that, as you've touched on, that in addition to them being income earners, their impact in terms of skill development across Bangladesh, of training new generations and in business competencies, is huge. And even the enterprises don't give you a full scale of the reach of BRAC in Bangladesh. It has a university, it has bCash, which is mobile banking. It is astonishing the range of things that your dad had a hand in sort of standing up. And now, Shamaran, you've started to, well, you've begun before you took over the leadership of BRAC International, but you're building out this network and trying to emulate some of this, but not all of it, in the model that you're taking to other countries. And you also lead the microfinance work, which is a big part of international. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we started 50 years ago. Of course, this is our 50th anniversary, but about 20 years ago, BRAC decided that we wanted to start doing programs outside Bangladesh. And the big catalyst for that actually was the fall of the Taliban government in 2001. And BRAC thought, here's Afghanistan, which kind of looks similar to where Bangladesh was in 1972 post our independence. And there were refugees coming from outside of the country in the same way that the refugees from the Bangladeshi refugees that had gone to India were coming back to Bangladesh in 1972. And we thought, let's see if we can do something about it. So that's how we went. BRAC International started, or BRAC started working internationally, and over time we went into other countries in Asia, quite a few countries in Africa, starting 2006. So we've done work in about 12 or 13. We've exited some. Right now we have direct implementation in 9, and we're starting hopefully our 10th one in the next few weeks. And through indirect advocacy and technical assistance in a few others. But the main idea was that, if you look at international development and the actors that are that control it or manage it, it's all northern, right? The funders are northern. So they usually come from US and Europe, right? And the agencies that do development are also northern, right? So all the large international NGOs that you can think of, the CARES, the SAVES, the Oxfams, the IRCs, all come from the global north, right? And BRAC is the only sort of southern organization, as Mark mentioned, that thought about setting up operations globally. And the idea was that we've got a different way of looking at poverty, right? And we have a different way of working with communities. And that's something BRAC has done very successfully in Bangladesh over many years. So BRAC very early on, even though our first grants actually came from Oxfam, so we were sub-grantees of a British NGO, but BRAC very, very early on decided that we're going to break away from this model where the northern NGOs come in, do the sort of grants management and donor relationship at the top and subcontract out to local NGOs, right? And the local NGOs stay as sort of sub-grantees. You never build relations with the donors, right? And that space is entirely always hogged by your northern counterparts, right? So that's something BRAC broke out of in the 70s. We said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to build our own relationships. We're going to do programming at scale. We're going to deliver quality and impact at a cost that is unmatchable, right? And that's how BRAC grew in Bangladesh. And we said we were going to solve problems at scale, right? So if we look at a problem like maternal mortality, we want to solve it for the country. Similarly with infant mortality, similarly with education. So when we went internationally, the whole idea is how do we take this southern approach, this solutions focus, right? The ability to scale and have impact at scale at a value for money that is unmatchable, right? How do we take all of that into the rest of Asia and Africa and build an organization that is Southern-led, working with people and for the people of the Global South? And that's been a 20-year experiment. Can't say that we've totally cracked it yet, but we're making good progress. We've scaled in quite a few countries. Some of our work scales very well. Other bits are more complex. But I think that's the approach that we continuously try to promote and stick to our values and see where we go. But I think that's, we are a little bit of an what's the word? Outlier. Yeah, like it'll come to me. Okay. But we're I mean, we're very different. Yeah, I don't want to say I'm trying to avoid saying unique, but we are very different. It's a very distinct type of organization with a distinct model, and we're trying to see how we can scale that globally.
But I think, I want to, in turning to Asif, actually stress and have him talk to the other bit that makes you different. We've talked, you're different because you're Southern and you're building that direct relationship with a, donor base, and you're organizing self-financing of a kind that Western NGOs really haven't gone nearly as far down the road. But the other difference, which may come as a surprise to many who don't know you well, is there's a lot more science in your model than there is in the classic Western NGO model. And I say that as somebody who's run UNDP, been on the board of many development NGOs. But what is astonishing is partly through BRAC University, but is the role that BRAC has played in really evaluating development interventions to see what works. And this is reflected in the ultra-poor graduation program, for which BRAC is very famous. It's reflected in the economics Nobel Prize that the MIT scholars Banerjee and Duflo got, who are close partners of the evaluation work done at BRAC University and by colleagues in the organization. I mean, it is a highly social science evaluation driven model of development. And again, that's extraordinarily unusual and not necessarily what you might expect for an NGO just trying to break free of the traces of, its northern counterparts. It's innovated its very own development model, if I can put it that way. But Asif.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the key essence, that the approach and also the rigor that goes in, right? Yeah. So I mean, I get that question asked a lot, that how can the same organization do such diverse type of programming, whether it's microfinance to education, water and sanitation. I think, it's the way we look at the problem, and then the solution that comes in is homegrown, it's long-term. You just don't look at a solution on a siloed basis. I mean, we look at overall poverty as a holistic, integrated approach. So I think that, and there is that, once you start something, that continuously asking that question, that is it working? And that's where you bring in the researchers, that's where you bring in the anthropologists, that's where you bring in other experts. And that ambition to go at scale as well, right? I mean, in BRAC at one point ran 64,000 schools in Bangladesh. 14 million children graduated out of BRAC schools, and these are very disadvantaged, marginalized community children. And essentially, and a key element, of course, of that is that the guiding principle is that women are at the center of all our development, whether not only it's about them, but at the same time, a lot of our deliveries, whether it's the school teacher, whether it's a community healthcare worker, they're all women. And so if you think about the 70s, 80s Bangladesh, where a lot of the women didn't want to come out of their door, and suddenly a woman riding a bike in the rural Bangladesh, that was game changer at that time. So these are the kind of transformational stuff happened on one hand, and on the other hand, like you said, that you really got into the science of delivery, which was very, very essential, and that rigor that went in really helped us develop models, and staying ahead of the curve as well to a certain extent, that what are the emerging problems that are coming up? And do we have a solutions for that where community is going to be very much embedded as part of that? And so with that same sort of approach, we are looking at climate change adaptation now. Again, we hear a lot of talk about climate change adaptation, but what are the solutions? That it's happening here and now in Bangladesh, in coastal areas. There are shortage of water, lands are sort of over-salinized, food security is a huge challenge, disasters are frequently happening, and again, so how do we come up with solutions that helps people to adopt, reskill them in different kinds of livelihood? There aren't a lot of answers. So we are using that same approach to come up with those kinds of models going forward.
Well, look, I think, I would, if I may, just take the liberty of saying, that you're going to need to keep innovating. The traditional donor model is getting less and less encouraging in countries like the UK. There have just been brutal aid cuts, and I think we'll see more of that, across quite a few donors. And so this drive for alternative financing models is going to remain a key part of it. And I've seen the relationships you've developed with foundations such as my own, Open Society, but also historically Ford, but now MasterCard, as we saw there, which is an extraordinarily transformational partnership with a remarkable new force on the foundation scene. And so I think you are going to have to keep innovating, and in that sense, I think it's probably, we should round out this with just a word from each of you about, in a sense, what you learned from the great innovator, Abed Bai.
Yeah, my father was, let me start from his parenting. I think my father was, had a very different parenting style from Bangladeshi parents at the time. My father always treated us like equals. Even when we were small children, he took the time to listen to what we had to say. He valued our opinions. He let us take our own decisions. He let us solve our own problems. And he, in that way, we were responsible for the decisions we were taking for ourselves and the outcome of those decisions. So I think that gave us an inner confidence to take decisions, to solve problems, and just to have a mind of one's own where, so, so those are some of the things as a child that, my father had this ability to focus his attention on whoever that he was talking to at the time, be it a child or whoever it is. But one of the most striking qualities about my father was authenticity. And, he was who he was, no matter where he was, and he always liked to call a spade a spade. So he would have very real conversations, and I think he took that to the organization and built an organization which wasn't afraid to talk about failure, which wasn't afraid to talk about uncomfortable things. And there's an early report where it's in Scott's book where his first project that Oxfam funded, he had delivered the project. And there was money left over, and he wrote back to Oxfam to return the money. And this is the first time that, a donor like Oxfam had anybody ever, a grantee, wanting to return their money. So that built a lot of trust in the organization. And lastly, I think one of the rare things, he had a rare humility about him that I think was quite striking, that people found quite striking. And that also had its effect on the organization, and that, for that reason, BRAC wasn't as well known for many years, and is still probably not as well known today, but those are some of the things that, we as leaders also inculcate within the organization, and that I've found very valuable.
Well, thank you, Tamara. Just a word each from each of you, as we're just coming out of time now for this segment, so Shamaran first.
Courage.
Courage, there we are. Sometimes one word does say it all.
I would say two things. I mean, one was, he's always said that stay relevant, right? So he said, like, if BRAC does not stay relevant, it it doesn't need to exist. So I think kind of staying as a social organization, coming up with newer social challenges and social problems, that has been the one thing. And the second thing is always about, the people who are the hardest to reach and the biggest need of support, your hand should go the first to them. So I think that was the kind of essential.
Well, look, I was lucky enough to join the party in London after, in Downing Street actually, after he got given his honorary knighthood. Well, not honorary, because he actually was joint British citizen, so he actually was able to use it. He was Sir Fazl Abed. But what I was personally most proud of was when I headed UNDP, I created a thing called the Human Development Prize and gave it out only 3 times. And one of them was to him, and he gave a lecture not far from here in a room rather like this on receipt of the prize. And what was for me the criteria? It was, having been lucky enough myself to be in a kind of leadership position on a much more short-term basis than him in development, I realized the power of leadership. These institutions bump along doing routine stuff if you don't inspire them every day with really purposeful, visionary leadership. And your dad did that every day, and I know the 3 of you are doing the same, and there are others from the leadership here in the audience who also are doing the same. So thank you, not just for 50 years, but to a remarkable new generation of leadership, and to, as my old Prime Minister said earlier, and as Bill Clinton said, to 50 years more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark and Asif and Shamran and Tamara. That was just a wonderful discussion, and it's always marvelous to get to know you a little bit better as people. We work together so closely, and sometimes it's really nice to hear some of the personal stories, so thank you. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome Darren Walker, someone I deeply admire. He is the president of the Ford Foundation, which is a $16 billion international social justice philanthropy. Under Darren's leadership, the Ford Foundation became the first nonprofit in U.S. history to issue a $1 billion designated social bond in the U.S. capital markets to strengthen and stabilize nonprofit organizations in the wake of COVID-19, and numerous organizations followed his lead. Among his many accomplishments, Darren co-founded the U.S. Impact Investing Alliance and the President's Council on Disability Inclusion in Philanthropy. He's a founding member of the Board Diversity Action Alliance. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, the recipient of 16 honorary degrees and university awards, including the very prestigious Harvard University's W.E.B. Du Bois Medal. So Darren, we are delighted to have you here. Please join me. Oh, you're that way.
Thank you. I know, originally. Good evening, everyone. This evening, this occasion is a joyous one for everyone at the Ford Foundation. Our journey with this amazing organization called BRAC began almost 50 years ago. In 1974, we made our first grant. And this occasion is joyous because at the Ford Foundation, we believe that institutions are essential to sustain social progress. This institution has stood for a radical idea that every person on this planet should live with dignity. It was founded by a radical man. And today, when the world needs institutions and radical ideas more than ever. BRAC is here. It is sustained because the work that it is missioned to do is needed more than ever. And so when people sometimes, when foundations, when donors get fickle and say, well, we've been funding this organization for so long. Mark, you know what I'm talking about. We've been funding this organization for so long. Do we need to continue to fund them? If you're in the work of justice, your work will always be needed and necessary, because the very idea of dignity, the very radical but humane idea that everyone should live with dignity, is a contested idea. And so we need warriors for justice, like BRAC, to be on the front lines, fortified, resilient, and determined to deliver on this organization's mission. Now, today, in the world in which we live, we are desperate for signs of hope. It is so easy on any given day these days to be depressed, dejected, demoralized, disgruntled, and disgusted. But there are reasons for hope. When I consider where the world was with respect to issues that BRAC has worked on, like maternal mortality, like childhood nutrition, poverty, we have made progress. And BRAC's leadership has contributed significantly to that progress. And so I hope that all of you who are committed to this organization, work in this organization, populate its board, generously give, will on the 50th anniversary of this inimitable, indefatigable, and essential organization, recommit yourselves to doubling down on what you do and on reminding the world that organizations like BRAC exist. At Ford, we think of our work in what I call the 3 I's: investing in ideas, investing in individuals, and investing in institutions. And I always come back to institutions because it's easy to be dazzled by that individual founder. It's easy to get excited about the new idea that everybody is looking for, that silver bullet that is never really delivered. But it's the institutions that matter. It's the institutions that sustain social progress. And you speak to any leader, you look over the history of social change and social movements. A movement might have been started by a leader, a charismatic leader. But if it does not, he or she does not have ultimately an institution upon which to stand, a platform from which they can do their work, the work often does not live beyond that leader's life. And so BRAC is an institution for all times, an institution that is needed for many years to come, because the challenge, the mission of this organization is one that sadly will not be fully realized anytime soon. So we need you. We need this organization. And I'm here simply to say thank you, to offer the Ford Foundation's deepest gratitude, and to simply acknowledge what an honor and a privilege it has been for all of us at Ford to be a part of the journey with you. Thank you. Deeply, deeply grateful for this occasion.
Thank you so much. It's now my great honor to introduce the last two parts of our program. And I feel incredibly fortunate to welcome some really, really special guests to close us out. So following our final speaker, so we're going to have a final speaker and then we're going to have a wonderful production. I will introduce our final speaker in a moment, but first let me tell you about what will follow. We have a marvelous Bangladesh-based arts company called Jatrik, and they are going to perform an original music and dance production composed and choreographed just for BRAC's 50th anniversary. It's very special. Jatrik is renowned in Bangladesh for their beautiful, compelling artistic productions. And tonight they're going to share a very moving piece called Rise, Women Rise. It's rooted in and inspired by the rich music of the arts, dance, and culture of Bangladesh. And you'll find a more detailed description in your gift bags. So that will follow. But before we get to them, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our final speaker. If you don't know her name now, I have no doubt you will hear it more and more. She is Fatiha Ayat, and let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a child rights activist, climate change campaigner, and the founder of an organization called Child. Child advocates for climate response, health, learning, information, and development. She's authored 4 books. She's a certified Android and iOS developer. In 2018, at the age of 7, Fatiha addressed the International Youth Day Conference in the United Nations ECOSEC Chamber on Global Warming and Climate Change. In 2019, she addressed the 74th United Nations General Assembly on the topic of domestic violence and gender inequality. In 2021, she contributed as a stakeholder in drafting the Glasgow Agreement for the UN Climate Change Conference in Scotland. Her list of awards and accomplishments is extensive. At 10 years old, Fatiha is already a formidable change maker, and she is a powerful ambassador for sustainable development. We are absolutely thrilled to have her. Please welcome Fatiha.
Good evening. And thank you, Ms. Danella, for introducing me. But I would like to introduce to you all a friend of mine from Bangladesh whose name is Latifa. She lives with her mother, who works in a battery recycling facility just next to their slum. Before I entered this event today, Latifa texted me that unlike her, I should not forget that I promised I would mention her story in my speech today. Because she knows best how it feels to forget important things. Besides loss of memory, she is also suffering from learning difficulty and development delay. And this was caused by that battery recycling facility, which was polluting the air and water around them and causing lead poisoning. And it's not just Latifa. Up to 800 million children all over the world have blood lead levels greater than 5 micrograms per deciliter, the level which can have grave consequences, including the breakdown of the central nervous system. Which is why my first call to action to all of you today is to please advocate alongside BRAC and come forward and set a leading example to promote healthy families and communities. Listening to the stories of today's panels, I recalled the story of one of my pen pals, Odete Kagami from Rwanda, whom I met online during the pandemic. And she told me that she lost both her parents in the genocide in Rwanda when she was only 2 years old. So she grew up in a teeming refugee camp along with the family of her uncle in eastern Congo. Now she is 30 years old. She used to work as a trainer in an IT company teaching computer literacy to the youth, but that shut down due to the pandemic. So now Kagami is afraid of returning to another refugee camp. Hence, my next call to action to all of you today is to please support BRAC and provide a range of financial services to people at the bottom of the pyramid. Help BRAC to focus on women living in poverty, in rural, hard-to-reach areas, to create self-employment opportunities, build financial resilience, harness women's entrepreneurial spirit, all by empowering them economically. During my last speech in the United Nations, in the conference called Digital Innovation for Youth Climate Action, which was September 9th, just a couple of weeks ago, I met Mr. Maurizio Martina, the Assistant Director General of Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations. And when he heard that I was from Bangladesh, he asked me about BRAC and Sir Fazle Hassan Abid. Because he was from the FAO, I told him one saying, of Sir Fazle Hassan Abid. Defeating hunger does not depend only on the science of food production. It requires us to address the problem of powerlessness among the poor. Listening to this powerful statement, Mr. Maurizio was dumbfounded and flabbergasted, and he promised me that he would propose my name to work as the Goodwill Ambassador of FAO, which is why I am deeply indebted and obliged to Sir Fazle Hassan Abid. It is from that compassion that I am calling to you all to invest in the farmers who took the responsibility to feed the people of the planet, where they themselves are on the front lines of climate vulnerability. Please help BRAC elevate farmers and their families out of hunger and malnutrition into a safe, secure, and sustainable livelihood. Today we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of BRAC, a grand silver jubilee. Although the journey officially started in 1972, whoever explored the life and lessons of Sir Fazle Hassan Abid must know that this all triggered in his head during the devastating cyclones of 1970, killing almost 300,000 people in the southern coastal regions of Bangladesh. Hence, my next call to action to all of you today is to please support BRAC's humanitarian response program to help the families rebuild, recover, and prevail. Help BRAC to meet the basic needs, inspire resilience, and foster self-sufficiency for those affected by a crisis, whether human-made, a natural disaster, or a disease outbreak. I would like to end my remarks today by mentioning the prime character of my story, Ikra. My story is called Diary of a Muslim Kid, which is this one. And Ikra, she faces cyberbullying because of her Muslim attire, or mainly this hijab or headscarf that I am wearing right now. Although this is complete fiction, research has demonstrated that there are serious consequences of cyberbullying, including lower self-esteem, increased suicidal ideation, and a variety of emotional responses, etc. In fact, 37% of the young people aged 12 to 17 have been cyberbullied at least once in their life. Hence, my last call to action today to all of you is to please champion BRAC's youth programs and enable the children and the youth to reach their full potential, And I would like to thank all of you for joining in this program, because so many of you here are important supporters and advocates who have helped BRAC address these issues and problems. I would like to end my speech today by saying one line. I would like you all to raise your right hand like this and repeat after me. I will defeat poverty. I will defend the planet. And I will demand equity. Okay, now put your hands down. And thank you all, and have a good evening.
Rise, Women, Rise is a presentation in homage to BRAC's consistent dedication to nurturing the potential of women. This performance is based on Bangladeshi classical folk and contemporary forms and is interwoven with the poems, prose, and words of women poets, writers, and activists from Bengal. Thank you.
ব্যাং ডাকে ঘন ঘন শীঘ্র নামে বৃষ্টি যেন ব্যাং ডাকে ঘন ঘন শীঘ্র নামে বৃষ্টি যেন
পরের বাড়ির পিঠা খেতে ভারী মিঠা পরের বাড়ির পিঠা খেতে ভারী মিঠা পরের বাড়ির পিঠা খেতে ভারী মিঠা ও লিসেন খেতে ভারী মিঠা পরের বাড়ির পিঠা খেতে ভারী মিঠা
শীঘ্র নামে বৃষ্টি যেন ব্যাং ডাকে ঘন
Hark, this tale of Khona.
In Bengal, in the Middle Ages, lived a woman, Khona. I sing her life, the first Bengali woman poet. Her tongue with a knife they severed. Her speechless voice, Khonar Bochon, parables of Khona, still resonates in the hills and skies. Only the poet by the name of Khona, bleeding she dies.
I am her voice, recounting her tales from the Vedic age to the 21st century. The fire that has remained stifled in the ashes of history, smothered by time and age. I am that woman. I speak of her. I read tears, I write fire, I live in infamy and consume its ashes. I endure violence and still breathe fire. I live as long as this fire burns within me.
Man, I've never raised my arms against you. The day you drew the insignia of blood, I felt pain. didn't tell you. On dry soil, no rose blooms, no peacock dances. Yet digging the sandy terrain, we drew water. We know earth is woman, the sky primal man. Then why have you chained my arms? Why didn't you let me see the sun for 1,000 years? Don't insult the earth that holds you. Man, I've never raised my arms against you.
I am an ordinary girl child. My physical value is barely more than mere zinc or copper. I haven't forgotten. Moments after my birth in the age of ignorance, I used to be killed by strangulation. None in my parental line is ever proud of me. My brother? My brother weighs in gold even today. Even in the waning days of his youth, he is still pure gold to have ornaments gilt. The prime amulet to keep the bloodline secure. I am nobody. I do not exist anywhere. I do not have any stability whatsoever. Yet, after overcoming numerous storms, tides, and apocalypse later, I am here today, still standing, alone. I know I also know more. I know that without me, this earth wouldn't move ahead even one step. I am that creator spirit woman, traversing storms, tidal waves, and fire. I am here, still standing, all alone. Why? Why? Why do you allow yourselves to be shut up?
Because it cannot be helped, as they are stronger than women. Because it cannot be helped, because they are stronger than women.
No. A lion is stronger than a man, but it does not enable him to dominate the human race. You have neglected the duty you owe to yourselves, and you have lost your natural rights by shutting your eyes to your own interest.
Like a solid, strong pillar, the word no stands firmly towards all my destinations. But it doesn't mean that I will never fight. I will never fall in love, will not listen to songs.
This puny form of mine covered in skin, I want to emerge out of this sheath, break out of the secret cabin of the tongue that keeps getting arrested. Bit by bit, I am emerging ahead. What otherworldly warmth is this, spreading all over my blood in the folds of my body, as though the stormy red day has arrived in great zeal. This day on, I'm tearing off the cover of modesty. I just cannot hide myself anymore. Has always been somebody else's world, not mine. These lungs are breathing, but this is borrowed breath from someone else. Nothing at all in this body is mine. Even the skin has been grafted from foreign money grants.
Sisters, rub your eyes and wake up. Advance. Say with dignity, Mother, we are not animals. Say, sister, we are not furniture. Say, daughters, we are not ornaments to be locked inside iron chests. Say in unison,
we are humans. This day on, I'm tearing off the cover of modesty. I just cannot hide myself anymore.
As women, we may mothers be, also wives we may, but as women we claim our place, as women to have our say. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. A new dawn is on the horizon, and when day finally breaks, it will be because of us. Phenomenal women.
So rise, woman, rise. Rise from your blazing ashes. Rise like a warrior. Rise fearlessly. Rise dangerously. Rise like the goddess you are. Like Bonbibi. Like Behula. Like Manusha.
She is here, gliding through the sea waves on the vast river Podda, with blue, muddy brown shades next to the muddy earth of her crevices, drawing you to her. She is here. She energy of this ancient land, Monusha, Bonbibi, towering above. Between the thundering white-grey clouds, protector, enabler, multitasker. The power to sow and reap, the power to destroy and replenish. Give back your life or take it away.
She is here. She has come through the ages. She has lived with the sages. She has traveled through long corridor of time to teach the knowledge of the Divine Mother. She is Goddess Durga, who has learned to live on her own terms. We Amazon warriors take on the great rivers and falls of Bengal, navigating our tributaries and waterways, sucking with a thirst and vengeance from the fruit of the trees that sway above the red earth that roots us below.
From which will spring 1,000 more wells.
Saga ni sa pani mapa, saga ni sa pani mapa, saga ni sa pani mapa. Irutakagete dhuni kutakari na druduta tom naach rahe gori tam tatai thei ditai. Irutakagete dhuni kutakari na druduta tom naach rahe gori tam tatai thei ditai. Irutakagete dhuni kutakari. बाज पायल कहो झनन झनन बाज पायल कहो झनन झनन बाज पायल कहो झनन 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 तुम तुम झनन 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 तुम तुम झनन 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 तुम तुम झनन 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 तुम तुम झनन 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 गीते धुनी कुतकरी नद्रुद्रुता तुम नाच रहे गोरी काम कतई थई दितई इरुतक गीते धुनी कुतकरी. Tadim tadim dirana, udani tadani dani tadim tadim dirana. Naditum taka taka dani tadara taka dani dim taka dani dim. Alari alari taka tadam dani taka tadam dani taka tadam dani dim dim dim. Dani alari dum 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 taka dani alari dim dim dim. Taka taka dani alari geete dhuni ko takadim na druduta tum naach rahe gori tam tatai thei thei tam tatai thei thei tam tatai thei thei ita taka geete dhuni ko takadim.
In a society, there is no pillar stronger than a free and educated woman. And there is no better role model than a man who respects and values women and champions their leadership.
Thank you, Sir Fazli Hassan Abid, and bravo BRAC for 50 years of championing women's leadership.